Hello, welcome to the HVAC Guide live show. My name is Josh. We will be answering your questions live. Sometimes we're joined by other pros in the chat who might know answers to questions that I don't, because let's be honest, that's not hard to do. Tonight, we have a special guest that is an expert in our industry. But before we bring on Clifton, let's take a moment to take care of a few housekeeping matters. The first is next week, we will be back live 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific here again, and it will be me flying solo answering your questions live. So make sure you're here next week. If you don't mind, hit the like and share buttons. That certainly helps us out. And then also, if you're in the chat, just say hello. Let us know where you're located in the country. That's always fun to know as well. Last but not least, let's take a moment to pay the bills and thank the sponsor of tonight's show.
Are you still using this old remote to control your AC? Upgrade to the Klima Smart Controller and unlock a host of smart functions to help you reduce energy consumption by 30% and automate home climate. And the best part, it's compatible with all brands of air conditioners, mini splits, and heat pumps. Now you can control your AC from anywhere in the world, schedule your AC, see your bills in real time, switch off your AC automatically based on occupancy, and even detect open windows. Everything to keep energy consumption as optimized as possible. Upgrade your AC experience today.
Tonight's guest is an expert in the HVAC industry. He brings over 30 years of experience with a diverse background spanning residential, commercial, and industrial sectors with a specialty in supermarket refrigeration and building automation. He's the host of the Did You Know ESCO HVAC show and manager of digital media at the ESCO Institute, one of the top organizations in the HVAC industry. Clifton's background has covered many different roles, including technician, contractor, technical advisor for a leading wholesaler, and developer of technical content and curriculum. His extensive list of credentials include a master electrician license and a certificate as a certified subject matter educator. I personally am a fan of his content and his show. Everyone, please welcome Clifton Beck.
Woo!
Let's go,
man. That's an intro, Josh. That is some fantastic stuff.
Thank you. They were late. They were lined up outside the studio today.
Oh, I hear it.
You know, holding up signs. I told you before we came on the show, I kind of mentioned during last week's show that you would be a guest, and some of the things you told me just in a 5-minute conversation a couple weeks ago. I don't think there's a lot of folks that know what's coming, and I've had more people call me this week. So I don't know where to start with all of this. I don't know if you have a place, because I was floored. I really was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess if we back up just a little bit and we all think about like where our EPA 608 came from, right? So that came out of the Clean Air Act. And so like if you open up the Clean Air Act and you went section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 and you get down to section 608, right? That was for the phase out of CFC refrigerants, chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants. That's really what we took all of the training for is, you know, we knew that we were going to be phasing out CFC refrigerants and HCFC refrigerants. And so we started this like whole phase out, right? It took us a while, especially things like R22 took a long time to get phased out, but that's where it all started. So as we continue to develop as a world, right, we're looking for safer refrigerants. The goal is to be non-toxic, non-flammable, non-caustic, right? That's the goal, and lower operating pressure. All hard to achieve. Hey, Gary, thanks for joining us tonight. So, you know, we went through not just that one. So that was the first one that I witnessed. So, you know, when I came into the industry, late 90s, you know, I was working on small refrigeration stuff. I was new in the industry. So I was working on all the crappy old, you know, pizza prep tables and walk-in coolers and ice machines. And, you know, so I was doing a lot of old R12 equipment, doing retrofits because that CFC phase out. And so I was working with alternative refrigerants. And that's really kind of where I got my interest in refrigerants and understanding, like, you know, what that looks like, you know, and that when we go through these changes, why are we going through these changes? So we're actually in the middle of what is the HFC phase down. It started in January 1st of 2022. We hit a huge milestone in January of 2024. And so all HFC refrigerants that we know, like every HFC that we're comfortable with, right? Our R410A, all of our commercial refrigerants, 134A that we used in cars, all of our 404 for low temp refrigeration, 134A in commercial medium temp applications, like tons and tons of refrigerants are going away. And we're on this like international effort to reduce our GWP refrigerants, right? So it's not just us, like it's the entire world. And in some places like Europe are further ahead than we are. So here in the United States, we got two different things going on. So you've got the Montreal Protocol, right? It's the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which says, hey, we got to phase this stuff down. And right, so that actually came in fairly early. So that came in like 3 presidents ago and didn't really get passed, took a while to get signed. So we had that going on, wasn't quite getting there. So we brought up the AIM Act, the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, signed off by President Trump, right? So in that, they copied this HFC phase down that was introduced into the Kigali Amendment. So you had an international treaty as well as an act of Congress, and it's a bipartisan. So we had Republicans and Democrats both going, okay, yeah, we need to do this. It's the right thing to do. We're going to do this. And so we started that. And then we also added things like the technology transition rule in there that set GWP limits on equipment as well. So it's not just that we're phasing down these HFC refrigerants, is we're actually limiting the GWP of refrigerants going into new equipment. And so for those of you, if you are not currently aware, you're getting ready to run out of R410A equipment, right? December 31st of 2024 was the last manufacturing date for R410A equipment because of the GWP, right? And so all HFC refrigerants globally are going to be phased down. Here in the US, it's by 85% by 2036, 11 years, right? So we got about a decade of HFC refrigerants. And we have to come up with something different in between. So like the automotive industry, we actually started getting rid of HFCs back in 2012 with the Cadillac CTS. That was the very first one. And then we started in 2016 phasing out 134A. And now, model year 25, every vehicle in the United States is R1234YF. It's not 134A anymore, right? So we already pushed HFC 134 out in automotive, 100%. So what does that mean for us, right? It means a lot. It means we're going from R410A, which we've used since 98-ish, or somewhere in that ballpark. But it's very, very important to understand what the refrigerants are made out of, okay? So here's the thing that caught my interest the most. Why do we flip a jug of R410A upside down? Well, I wish we had a poll out there in the timer. This is like the Jeopardy question, right? Anyone in the audience know why we flipped the jug of R410A upside down, but we didn't have to with R22? I wasn't sure. Just a few years ago, I wasn't sure, okay? There's a lot of minds out there going, oh, that's right. We were taught that. Reason being, R22 was a single compound chemical. One molecule, right? R22. Hydrochlorofluorocarbon. One carbon, fluorine, chlorine, hydrogen. That's it. Okay. We actually, fractionation, John, you're right. Why? So fractionation is like the potential for 2 different gases to boil off at different temperatures and lose one of them. So like the demonstration I do, Josh, you'd love this, right? So I put on like the whole mad scientist outfit and I take a vial of water and I put red food coloring in it and tequila. Okay.
I've seen you do this. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I've seen this.
That's to show the fractionation that John was talking about. So like, water at atmospheric pressure is around 212 to boil. Well, tequila is about 188, 186, right? I'm glad you've seen that one, John. So if we bring and I put it on a little heated Bunsen burner, little electric Bunsen burner, bring that sucker up to about 190, and the ethanol, the tequila boils off. and I can boil off all of the tequila as long as I keep it under 212. And then I end up with a glass of tequila and a glass of water with red food coloring in it. And so that is the principle of fractionation. So the reason we did that with R410A to flip that tank upside down is because R410A has 2 refrigerants in it. I didn't know that until just a few years ago. I worked this crap for 20 years and didn't understand it had 2 refrigerants in it. When we moved away from R22, we actually did a very simple thing. We took out one element and we put in another, and it went directly from R22 to R32. R32 is a single compound refrigerant. It was mildly flammable, patented in 96. Okay. Mildly flammable, not very, but a little bit. And we weren't ready for that in our building codes. So we took another refrigerant called R125 and we mixed the 2 of them, R32 and R125, 50%. And we got R410A. And so we had to flip that jug upside down to make sure we got liquid. So that was a consistent blend of refrigerants, half and half. All right. So going forward, we're going to be ditching the 125 to get the global warming potential down from where R410 was. Because actually, when we went from 22 to 410A, our global warming potential actually went up. We went with R410A because it had no ozone depleting potential to it. So we're trying to get our global warming potential down. And so to do that, unfortunately, our flammability is going up a little bit. So what we're going to see going forward is we're going to see that R32 that we've been using this entire time as half of R410A. And then we're going to see another one called R454B. And it literally takes 32, 2/3, and it blends 1/3 of 1234YF that we started using in vehicles.
So
That's it.
I do want to just say, because it's like information overload at this point, but to make it dumb for people like me, what's interesting to me is we're phasing out 410, the equipment for sure, right?
Done.
And we're bringing in these A2L refrigerants. But what you're saying is those, we already have a timeline now for those to be gone.
Think about that, right? This is all HFCs by 2036. R32 is an HFC, and R454B is an HFC blended with an HFO.
I don't think that that's being communicated very well. I mean, we were told when we went, I was in the trade when we went from R22 to 410, we were told that 410 was God's gift to us, that it was, they would put green leaves on everything. And we'll never change again. This is the end of the road. It's great for the environment.
Yep.
And then I feel like that's kind of the bill of goods that we were sold again. Now that we're phasing out
new refrigerants, Josh. The new refrigerants, right?
They're
new. They're going to be here forever. Yeah, they got a shelf life of about a decade.
Wow,
isn't that huge?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and get this. There is no EPA SNAP approved refrigerant to replace R410A. So we're going to have to continue having R410A for our existing systems, which means we have to recover. Like if we don't recover R410A refrigerant, we're not going to have enough to service legacy systems within the next few years.
Yeah.
That's rough to even think about.
Yeah.
We could run out of service gas because of its high GWP and this phase down. Yeah, we're already at a 40% reduction from where we were just a few years ago.
So I think that begs a question then. And the question is, if we know that these new refrigerants are going to go away too, where are we going? Where's all this going?
Boy, that's a great one. Before we get up to there, because boy, we're going to have some people like scratching their brains on this one. I wanted to answer John Canfield's question, right? John, R1234YF, it is an HFO. And if anyone wants to understand what an HFO is, right? It's super, super simple. Ooh, I wish I had my molecule, right? An HFO is an HFC. It's a hydrofluorocarbon refrigerant. And between two of the carbon atoms it has, instead of a single bond, a double bond, an olefin bond. And that's what makes an HFO the HFO. It's the only refrigerant class we've ever had that doesn't get its designation from its composition. Everything else was designated by what is going into it. This one is designated by the chain, the olefin bond that is in there, but it's still hydrofluorocarbon. It's HFC based. It just has that olefin bond, and it operates on our POE or PVE oil. So R410A, R32, R454B, and that R1234YF are good with the POE oils. So it's not a huge transition refrigerant wise. And even our operating pressures, like when we go from 410 to 32 and 454B, we're going to go up a couple pounds for one and down a couple pounds for the other. Operating pressures, they're about the same. So, okay. So what do we do, right? Our chemists at Honeywell and Chemours and Core, they keep saying, right, all we've been doing this entire time is taking chemicals, doing as much as we can in the soup bowl and coming up with something new. And we're running out of options with the current chemical classifications that we have. So unless we come up with some miracle refrigerant in the next decade, or if one of these HFOs ends up making its way to be a single component refrigerant for HVAC, which so far is not working, we've got to go to our naturals. We've got to go to hydrocarbons and CO2. It's just that simple. Lucas, thank you. I was just a technician, mind you, right? I spent my years in the field. I loved what I did, but now it's like, I need to know. I want to show me what this thing means, right? We're all technicians. Josh, I'm sure if I give you a new piece of equipment that you've never worked on before, in a few hours, you're going to be able to explain how that sucker works.
I feel like I have more of an electrical background, so I'll definitely be able to explain to you that side
diagram
of things.
Yeah, you're going to figure out that sequence of operation through the wiring diagram. I have no doubt in my mind. Well, if I hand you a new refrigerant, I don't think you would assume that you're going to go work with this. You want to know what that thing is. That's the reason we're having this conversation. That's all I did was I looked at these refrigerants and I went, somebody a whole heck of a lot smarter than me figured this out. And I just went to a couple of the people in our industry, especially like Eugene Silberstein and Carter Stanfield, and went, hey, what are these things actually? Could you show me? And that's where this all began. And so then once I started seeing it, it was like, oh, well, heck, that's nothing. I mean, that's just chemicals, right? That's just like, I can't get 22. Let me get this monitor out of the way. Right here's as simple as it gets. Right here's as simple as it gets for everyone out there. Boom. There's R22. Hydrochlorofluorocarbon. Pull out that last chlorine, put in a hydrogen, it's R32. It's literally that simple. Take 32 and I mix it with 125 and I get R410A. 32 and 1234YF, I get 454B. But I needed for someone to show me that. And then after someone showed me that, I was like, whoa, man, I gotta tell everybody about this that doesn't know, because that's kind of like math for me, you know. Mm-hmm. If you can show me, then I'll understand it. And so once I seen that and went, holy crap, we're gonna be running out of new refrigerants in a decade. That means you and I are going to see a new world of HVAC before it's all over. Unless some miraculous refrigerant comes into play, we're going to be going away from systems that we currently understand. And if we think about it, all you got to do is just think a little bit different. Like, why do we not want flammable refrigerants in their house? Because they're freaking flammable. No brainer. So what can we do with them? What if we got them out of the house? Yeah. Well, John, great one. What if we don't put refrigerant in the lines? What if we put the refrigerant, whether it was R290 or CO2 or whatever it ends up being, milk, water, whatever it ends up being, what if we just put it outside in an air to water heat pump, a little residential chiller, and we ran water, we ran glycol inside, and we just used water or glycol running inside. We still used a coil indoor. We just piped it with PEX and ran water through it. And so that's actually what we're doing around the world. We actually had our very first R290 air to water monoblock at AHR last year, right? Exactly. Last year. So this is the second year they showed it. Now, we don't have them approved in building codes yet, but going forward, you betcha, because like Europe, they're eating this up. Because now, I mean, think about the installation on these suckers. All I got is 2 water lines and an electrical line, right? So, Philip, you are on it, my friend. We're going to start hearing this word in our industry called monoblock. And that's really what it is. It is a modular block chiller. It's a heat pump. And now we can use things like that one that they had at AHR last year. That was a 3-ton unit, and it had 2.8 pounds of R290. I got 20 pounds of R290 in my propane tank sitting a couple feet from the house. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, Philip, that Daikin Altherm currently being used with R410A. Daikin has released it to the market. Fantastic piece of equipment. And so all we'll have to do when we're ready for that is put whatever refrigerant we want in that sucker. And we'll just put it outside. But that's going to be a different mindset. I mean, think about that. Then we basically become residential chiller technicians at that point.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we're basically one thing that I haven't been clear on. Mm-hmm. I've seen pictures, but if we've got this unit outside and we're piping water inside, what does it look like inside? I mean, is it a hydronic coil?
No, just use a standard evaporator coil and take the metering device out of it.
Okay.
So think about that. So now the one thing that would have to change is our line sizing, right? Currently we're using, typically like 3/8 and 3/4 or whatever. We would have to end up having the same flow, right? So we'd end up using like 1/2 inch up to a certain capacity and then 3/4 for the other. But we're just going to use an aluminum or copper coil inside, and we're going to pass water through it. And it's because we can run whatever temperature we want. I mean, think about that. Like with refrigerant, we have a limited control on the temperature. Well, if I'm running, water, I can actually control. Think about that. I can control my latent heat removal. I can adjust that heat transfer factor simply by adjusting the temperature of that water and that velocity of that water. And so it gives us a whole lot of capability when we start thinking about that. Ryan, yeah, UK has monoblocks. That was the craziest thing. So at AHR this year, just a few weeks ago, yeah, I got congestion. I think it's the AHR congestion we've all got. So at AHR, every single equipment manufacturer was releasing some type of a monoblock, either an R410A or an A2L for residential applications for this year, model year 2025. With the anticipation of whatever refrigerant we need to down the road. I mean, it's getting to the point like our water heaters, same way, all of our plumbing industry, like you guys are losing gas and electric water heaters if you didn't know, right? You got about 3 years left, and we're going to be changing drastically, and you're going to be going to things like air to water solutions for domestic water. So A.O. Smith at AHR just a few weeks ago introduced a CO2 residential heat pump water heater that sits outside. Heat pump sits outside, and you got a tank inside, storage tank. So it's not just our industry that's going to see these transitions. It's going to be a variety of industries that are looking at what their alternatives are because it's so difficult to work. Yeah, well, yeah, Phil, like so that latent heat removal, we can alter our sensible heat ratio, right? Simply by controlling the flow and controlling the air. So we can make these suckers dehumidify like crazy if we wanted to. Especially running glycol. I mean, think about what you want a 20-degree evaporator temp.
What about utility consumption? Are they Are they better as far as electric bill or?
Yeah, so you think about like we're really gaining a lot when we go into our A2Ls. Our A3s are incredibly efficient refrigerants, right? So the monoblock is going to, or the heat pump water heater are going to gain a significant amount of efficiency, but we are going to lose a little bit in the water transfer. So we do have a fractional change in water, and if we don't insulate our lines properly, we have that potential for loss in our lines. But they're incredibly efficient systems, and so that's really that next generation. Ryan, that Sanco CO2, they're crazy good systems that you can use for domestic water as well as your hydronic system. And so, yeah, Sanco's been making one for quite a few years. Actually, Zenobio Aguilera out at CTE campus and college has these CO2 units in their training lab. So they're teaching their HVAC technicians right now how to work with those Sanco CO2s, because it's the next generation for our industry. I mean, we've got a decade to get prepared for this. So it's not like we've got a few years to get ready for the A2Ls. Like, we've got a few years to get ready for what's next. And we have to be realistic about it.
So CO2 specifically, isn't the pressures really high? Like I've
2000 PSI. And only operate up to 105. Yeah, 105 Fahrenheit. And then we start having issues, with the refrigerant, the saturation of the refrigerant. So there's a few. Oh, thank you, Tony. I'm glad you're here, man. We were just talking about you before the show and how much we enjoy you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so CO2 in a non-strain critical system works good in that residential application because our water temperature, right? We're getting like 150-ish or so. And so a lot of times we're going to be using a supplemental heat like electric to be able to top it off to 180 if we want 180. But CO2, we've had some that are actually maintaining operation. That Sanco CO2 out in California is doing a great job. So, there's a lot of new technologies and applications that we just have to be open to, when we start looking at this transition.
Not to change the subject, but Emery keeps asking. I think he's asked this question 3 times now, and I think, unless you tell me I'm wrong, the answer to getting replacement refrigerants for R22, I don't think we need to worry about that anytime soon, right? I mean, you can still your local HVAC professional still should be able to get his hands on at least a couple different options to help you, at least for now, and for the foreseeable future.
And you can still buy R22. Remember the reason.
No, I can't. I can't afford that stuff.
Well, I was going to say, I just seen a post today. Somebody bought 2 jugs of R22 and it was $2,400.
Oh my gosh.
And I went, I'm so old school. I can remember when I got into the industry, we were selling R22 for $8 a pound to the consumer. So retail.
When I got in the industry, you could buy a jug of it for less than $100.
$100.
I remember that for sure.
Absolutely. So R22 still be around, but think about this. The reason we're going through all of these phase downs and phase outs of refrigerants is because we didn't fix leaks to begin with. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Like in automotive, like all those O-rings, or, every time you had a leak in an R134A system in a car, what'd you do? You went to your local auto parts store and you picked up a can yourself because it was under 12 ounces, which doesn't apply to the 608 or 609. You can buy it yourself and topped it off and you went. R22 systems, gas and go for decades. Well, it was never intended for systems to leak. It was always intended for us, if a system was leaking, to repair it. And so because of that, we've kind of put ourselves in this predicament of the refrigerants, which is forcing us to look for our alternative refrigerants, which it's getting kind of slim picking.
I'm always optimistic about change as far as our industry goes. I always say make it more complicated. That makes it to where it's less, no offense to all the homeowners that like to do DIY, but in a world where we're constantly being told that they can buy that $10 part on Amazon and that we shouldn't have charged them a couple $100 to come out, that, I've always welcomed change. And so that being said, I think that just knowing that everything will be outside. Yes, it'll be possibly highly flammable if they have an R290 system, but I will argue that Ryan has asked about leaky coils and some of the other issues. um i I would guess that at least a percentage of the problems that folks have with their heating and air system are due to the professional that installed it, if you want to call them that.
Yep.
um and just knowing that it's a package unit that no one had to braze, no one didn't flow nitrogen, no one didn't introduce some other non-condensable to that system, maybe these systems would be much more reliable.
I am a technician myself, right? 20 plus years in the field. And I've spent 4.5 years as a technical service advisor for a major distributor, and did site visits for major manufacturer that I used to work with. And I can tell you, ductless systems get a bad reputation because of bad installations. Plain and simple. They're never flared and torqued properly, and they leak and they get bad reputations. I've got a Daikin 4-port 3-ton heat pump for the garage, studio, wood shop, installed in 2020, and I've cleaned filters in 5 years, right? So it all comes down to that installation. And so I'm 100% with you. What if we could put the entire refrigerant system as a sealed system outside, and all I got is those 2 water lines and electrical, especially if I put valves on them? What if that service calls, hey, I just lost a compressor? Sweet, I'll bring a temporary one with me. I'll have it swapped out in 30 minutes. And then we'll talk about what we're going to do with your other one. Are you going to trade it in? We're going to repair it. We're going to do a new one. And so it opens up the business model like crazy. I'm thinking, man, how convenient would it be to like no one ever be down for a day? It's literally oh, you're down. Okay, we got to get a part. Man, I got a spare unit on my, they're an inverter. I got a 5-ton inverter on here that'll run from 18,000 BTU up to 60. And I'm going to throw it on this thing, and this will get you by. It's just like when we had our universal parts on the van, right? Had a turbo 200 to get by on a capacitor. Well, you want to buy a new one? You want to buy this one? And same kind of model when we start thinking about equipment. And it just completely changed the way I thought about, consuming energy and reducing my carbon footprint when I talk refrigerants. Because, man, if we can get down to using things like, propane, R290, it's got a GWP of, like 3 or 4, depending on what scale you look at it, or CO2, and leave it outside, man, I think it's a great solution. But boy, it changes the way you think about it, though, right? This industry hasn't changed much in almost 100 years. And now we're having to go, okay, maybe HVAC contractors are going to become a little bit more like plumbers or chiller technicians, which is great. I mean, it makes for a great demand for, our professionalism.
Yeah. Yep. Well, let me bring up the other elephant in the room, because I've seen all these videos online of, it always looks like they're in a third world country and they're barefooted and these units are exploding and all of this stuff. What say you on that? I mean, what's the likelihood of something like that happening as we, move into a more flammable industry?
I truly feel bad for the families of the technicians that have experienced those. And so if you look at the potential for exploding a A2L refrigerant, it's sadly disappointing. I've tried and got a whole video. It's very disappointing. They will not, right? It's hard to get them to do any type of flammability. But there are videos on ductless systems exploding and lives that were tragically lost because of that. And I can tell you, there is a manufacturer in India that manufactures an R290 ductless system that is not allowed in any other country in the world. And so If you simply do a internet search for an R290 ductless system, you will find some R290 ductless one-to-one systems manufactured in India. And if you look at the videos that we've seen with these catastrophes, most of them are technicians that are working in very poor electrical conditions, many of in flip-flops, and you realize real quickly that it's very likely that they are of India descent. And then so we start thinking about, right, will R290 ever make it into any type of ductless system? I hope it does not ever get to anywhere in the world. Will we go to things like R290? Absolutely. R600, isobutane. All of our domestic refrigerators and freezers are already using R600A, isobutane, just as flammable as propane. That's what we went with when we got rid of R134A and R404 in our refrigerators and freezers. So the likelihood of seeing a highly flammable explosive refrigerant in any type of a split system is very, very unlikely.
Does that mean if they phase down these HFCs and everything else moves in this I keep using the word hydronic, but monoblock or whatever, water distribution instead of refrigerant. Does that mean we could see an extinction to ductless products?
Yeah, I absolutely see that. Maybe not the way we think about it. Like, so if we think about, what that potential is there, if we get into that hydronic solution, a ductless could have water running through it. The ductless indoor.
It could. Okay, that's a possibility.
Yeah, because think about a hydronic system, right? The reason that we use hydronics in commercial buildings is the flexibility. All I got to do is run me a branch box or a branch port to distribute my water to where I want it to go. If it's a open loop system, that could actually be my domestic water as well. So in the summertime, I've got flexibility with my water. If I'm cooling with this, now that cooling side, I can send to individual indoor heads. I can send that to a coil that is in my ducted system. If I'm in the heating, I've now actually got water that I could run in loops underneath my garage or underneath of my sidewalk because I have a pump that is constantly circulating. Remember, on these monoblocks, they are constantly circulating this water, even when they're not running the refrigeration cycle. So we have a constant supply of water flow. So we use it in many applications, including ductless style indoor heads.
Interesting. Okay. JC just scared the heck out of me. He was saying that my audio was out. That happened to me last week, but it's never happened with a guest.
Oh, are we back? All right. Yep. John says we're back now.
So, in a world where I avoid politics as much as possible, we talk about some of the stuff that affects us on our YouTube channel, and I know you do too. What's the likelihood of whether I'm not even talking about one side or the other. What's the likelihood of any politician saving us at this point? What's the likelihood
going back to like 410 and 22?
Or R22. Is there a world where that's even possible?
There is actually. So let's talk about how that could work.
Ooh, wasn't expecting that answer.
Oh yeah, absolutely we can. So I will give you the two options of how this could actually partake. So when a new president comes into office, they actually have 60 days to use the Congressional Appeal Act or Repeal Act to go back and remove anything that had happened in the previous 60 days like that. We're actually seeing some of that right now. So in the 60 days before January 1st, when we look at the things that were in play, some of the new leak rates through the technology transition rule, some of the leak rates and some of the commercial refrigerant management for grocery refrigeration through the AIM Act, those could absolutely be removed. Now, the technology transition rule doesn't apply, and the HFC phase down doesn't apply. So we've already backed out of things like the Paris climate talks, but that didn't back us out of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. That was an international treaty of, I don't remember offhand, seems like 84 countries, something like that, right? Doesn't back us out of that at all. So if any president wanted to go back and remove things like the AIM Act, pieces of the AIM Act, or even the Clean Air Act, it has to start the process like it's a brand new bill, which means it could take 3 to 5, 6, 7 years to pass through Senate, House, all the way back to the president. So it absolutely could happen. You can have states that can supersede whatever the government is doing. Take New York.
What?
New York. Oh, by golly, man, this is a whole nother conversation. Right now, New York is trying to pass a GWP of 10 for VRV by 2030. That ain't good. That almost eliminates VRV completely, right? So there are states that are already building their own policies in case something would happen to things like the AIM Act or the Clean Air Act. So everything is absolutely possible. So the amount of time that it would take could be the challenge. And also, like, even if we turned it back, right? If we went, okay, automotive industry, every manufacturer converted their lines from R134A to R1234YF. But it's okay if you want to go back to 134A. We're talking millions, if not billions, to re-retrofit the assembly lines to even do that versus staying with the refrigerants that they're already using. Same way for our air conditioning systems. When we start adding mitigation into these systems, right, they're not going to completely rebuild their production lines. Some of our manufacturers were done making R410A in third quarter of last year. So we're talking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of expenses to the industry to re-retrofit with those A1 refrigerants. So probably not going to see that happen, even if it was allowed. So it's like we're on this roller coaster right now that doesn't have good brakes.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I had heard of other states that were trying to speed up the AIM Act and specifically, but I wonder when states do that, just out of curiosity, again, I don't even want to get political, but when you see states do stuff like that, do you think that they're trying to move the needle a little further because they care about the environment or whatever the reason is? Or do you think that there's a chance that some of these states are maybe moving too fast and they don't actually know that the decision they're making is actually maybe ill-advised would be the best way to say it. And the reason I'll just tell you one last thing, and I don't know if I actually may have heard it on your show, but I remember someone talking about a decision being made and they were supposed to be the HVAC engineer, the pro in the room, where this bill was about to be proposed, and the other 10 individuals in the room were lawyers and politicians. And it's like, you see where I'm going with that? What say you?
Oh yeah. I've seen, well, take things like New York, right? Realistically, I don't think it can happen. I don't think the manufacturers could come up with an alternative fast enough. So yeah, there is things that have been put into play. And I think you're right. I think it's more of, hey, if you try to reverse these, we're going to make it so difficult that it's going to come back to you in a major way. And every manufacturer is going to come to you and your political party and go, okay, this is serious. You've disrupted the entire industry tenfold now. So yeah, there have been some very interesting things. There have been some things that have been shot down just in this last year that could have affected these types of decisions, just like the GWP limit set by the technology transition rule. We had states like California that were looking at a GWP of 500 and going, hey, we want to get lower. Literally, it was a matter of, hey, we want to get lower than the EPA. So we're going to go from 750 to 500. Does that sound like a great idea? Yay. And all of a sudden everyone went, yeah, but that eliminates R32. So like half of the equipment in the United States can't be sold in the state of California anymore. And then they went, ooh, didn't realize that. And so that was removed off from it. Yeah, exactly, Brian. Right.
Brian, we are not mentioning any names, sir.
No, I'm just saying a state, just a state that was the goal, right? They wanted to be aggressive. They wanted to be progressive until they realized that it couldn't actually meet the demand of the industry. But, you know, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. So I'm just saying it really comes down to us, like what works best for us. I know what works best for me. Give me a monoblock chiller. I'd yank my residential 13-SEER AC out in a hurry and go with a high efficiency water solution.
Yeah, I mean the COP on some of these units is what, like 5
5 and 6 with our 290. It's like that's like a geothermal without being in the ground that I can put outside and run for almost nothing and super quiet. And yeah, I'm all about it. Oh, Emery, I can't go there. One of the best warranty.
I was wondering if you would see that. That's funny.
Yeah.
So is there, because there's, you know, there is the crowd, right? And then there are politicians or states that are trying to move the needle further along. Is there anyone on the other side? Like, is there a politician out there that's like, no way, we're going back to R22? Like, does that even exist?
Not really. Because everyone understands that, you know, and we could call this whatever we want to call it, right? I kind of teeter in the middle, you know. Are we contributing to global warming? Is our planet warming? January was the highest month of global temperatures on record, right? Things are changing. The world is changing. Are there ways that I can help that? Are there ways that I can help protect my future generations, my kids, my grandkids, and prolong that? If there's a chance that I can, I don't have to be convinced that it's global warming. You tell me that there is a safer solution for my kids long term and financially it looks good, by golly, I'm in. And when I start thinking about, you know, how many poor operating HVAC systems are out there right now that could be operating on little mini chillers and saving a ton of money, and if you have a major repair, you could yank it out and swap it out with another one in 30 minutes or so. Man, it sounds pretty intriguing to me. I like solutions, good solutions.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's really good. I I also wonder if some of these solutions, and I already know the answer because prices never go down in our industry, but you would hope and think that some of these technologies might open the door to more budget friendly options for homeowners
I
because
agree.
I mean, R290 is not that expensive, so we take the refrigerant out, and then now we're just looking at the equipment and the engineering itself. And you would think that there should be. I mean, you already mentioned some Indian company, but there should be some company out there that can shake up the industry and maybe offer folks some budget friendly options.
I seen one in the chat. I'm gonna go. Let me see if I can find that real quick. I seen a really, really interesting a while ago. Boy, we've had a lot of great conversations here. Okay, Ryan, this one's for you. All right. What do I think of inverter window units? Right? Inverter heat pump window units. Is it a game changer? Right? Is it taking away from us? I can tell you personally, I have spent a lot of time visiting manufacturers this year. I've been invited to some really cool factories, really cool new storefronts and distributorships. And I'm not going to plug any names for anyone, but I can tell you that I seen a cold climate inverter heat pump window unit that doesn't take up the whole window that just knocks my socks off, right?
Wow.
That does an amazing job. And it does such a good job, they decided that they are not going to market it to big box shops. They will only market it to qualified contractors who have went through training with them. And I went, dang, sign me up, because it comes back to finding solutions, right? Do we have solutions for homeowners? What if it's got an existing system in it? It's got crappy ductwork because it was never designed for air conditioning, and we got all these rooms, and can we use a supplemental inverter heat pump? If it is sold, installed, and serviced by a qualified contractor, you have my 100% support across the line.
What refrigerant was in it?
That one is an R454B unit.
454B. Okay.
Yep.
So if they're able to use that technology, and then somehow keep the refrigerant outside completely. So have a window unit where everything outside is refrigerant, and then have a hot water lines going to, I don't know. I'm probably getting too crazy here, but that
Yeah,
seems like that would be a real game changer.
that would. And, could we do something like that? I can tell you that I have sit in on so many Department of Energy meetings in these last 2 years that it just, sometimes my mind wants to melt because they're looking for all these solutions and potential solutions. And a lot of those have came up because what do you do for like multifamily? When we expect residential chiller units to be ready, available, they are already available right now. Every manufacturer has one that they're launching for 2025. Some of them released them for 2024, like the Daikin Altherma residential applications, single phase.
Crazy.
So yeah, it is crazy. So when we look at, what could be done there, I mean, your mind just thinks about like, what are these options? Like, what are these solutions? There's so many solutions we can think of because you think about like multifamily, right? Multifamily may not have a window, right?
Yep.
Anyone's worked in multifamily air source units, you went, well, where can I put the refrigerant? And so I've seen solutions like, well, what if we hang it outside? And then you're still pumping water in. The water never is exposed to the outside because it's going directly from a conditioned outside space straight through a wall to an indoor conditioned space. And so you could have an exterior wall hung mini chiller for multifamily. And I went, dang. Okay, so there's so many options. I mean, just as you can tell, my OCD with something like this is like, feed me the candy sound because it's so exciting to think about. Like,
Are these units
solutions?
Are they still somewhat around the same size as a typical side discharge unit, like a mini
They're
split
really
or a
small. So they were looking at like some of these little ones that were like under 9,000 BTUs, so little bitty fellows. And there's just so much you can do with that. Like I've got, so I did a class on a couple of years ago, and I bought a little 120 volt inverter ductless system off from Amazon and decided to tear it apart and see what was in it. Did a class on it, broke the inverter down. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, whoa, wait a minute. If I put me a refrigerant to water coil on this sucker, I've got me a 120 volt, 6,000 BTU residential inverter chiller heat pump. And I just bought this sucker off from Amazon for like $600. So
nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. One of the prices came through a while ago, is what would a cost of these things look like? Well, go out there and start checking them. And there's some pretty favorable prices on some of the products that I keep seeing. There's competition in the market right now, which is really good. Unfortunately, one of the questions that came in earlier about how will tariffs affect equipment, refrigerant prices, refrigerant, not so much because we produce a bunch of it here in the United States. And so I don't think we will see that, but we will see some equipment getting tariffs on it. Absolutely. Which will drive some of those prices up. But then again, now it's back to market competition. It causes all of our American manufacturers to go, okay, maybe they're doing some things right around the world, and we'll just do that here and use our own technologies and our own refrigerants. And yeah, no, John, that's my goal, man. We just have to think, right? It's a changing world, and we just have to change. And the ones that are willing to change, you're going to be the early adopters, and you're going to be the successful contractors out there. Guarantee it.
Yeah, no doubt. I the only thing that drives me nuts about, and again, I'm not going to go in on tariffs or political stuff, but just anything that ever affects pricing. I was a contractor for 12 years and my prices never went down once. Now there were many years where it stayed the same for one reason or another, but that's the only thing. I hate when things make the price go up because I know, even so, like for example, if the powers that be decided to remove those tariffs a month from now because negotiations or whatever, prices have gone up, and I've never seen them go down. Like
No,
the manufacturers are like, great, we've got our, I don't know, maybe I'm getting stepping out a little too far, but it's like they get their teeth in you and they're not going to let go.
Well, I think about this too, right? I started pondering that same question when we thought about equipment. Is there a way that we could make residential split systems cheaper, right? Less expensive? Well, if we got rid of the copper line sets, that's a pretty big cost. Those things have went nuts in the last decade. And if we got rid of lots of refrigerant and we got down to just a few pounds of refrigerant, now we got something. Now there's no reason we can't, look at the cost of equipment and go, okay, we can make this modular unit instead of an entire system, and the price should be able to come down because we have less components and less refrigerant.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Clifton, I don't know if you've ever seen my show, but one of the things I like to do is, and I'll just pose this to everyone watching. We know there's some bad apples in our industry, some folks that make all the HVAC contractors, those of us that I'd like to think are good, look bad.
What?
And so with that said, if you know a good apple, if you know a good HVAC, electrical, or plumbing company, drop their name in the chat and where they're located in the country. Let's show those folks some love. But you never know, you might end up showing them a little more than love. You might actually send some business their way if someone in your area sees your comment. So let's do that. And then Clifton, I normally end my show with a question about, advice you would give to your own family if they were buying a heating and air system. But I'd rather not. Let's end the show with what's some words of wisdom that you can, because I feel like this show went so fast, and like JC said, I have a million more questions, but what are we going to end here with?
I would say be willing to confront change and invest in yourself, because training and certification for new products is one of the most important ways to show that you have actually learned those new products. And as we make these transitions, we're going to continue making significant transitions, whether it's refrigerant related or it's equipment related. And I think it's very important to embrace change, educate yourself, stay aware, hop on this podcast so that you're getting informed, so you have the right information for your consumers. That's the best thing we can all do.
I like it. Looks like a few companies have been highlighted in the chat. So shout out to all those companies. You must be doing something right for all these folks to highlight you. This has been great, Clifton. I really appreciate your time. I feel like we've probably scared the crap out of our industry tonight.
Hope so.
And but maybe in a good way. And yeah, I would love to have you on again in the future, especially if something crazy happens. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Anything else you want to note before we hang it up?
No, sir. Thank you so much for having me on here. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, those of you that joined us again, I'll be back next week answering your questions live. We might unpack a little bit more on some of the crazy stuff Clifton talked about tonight. In the meantime, make it a great week. We'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.